Welcome back to Mindful Escape, the podcast that inspires you to live your best life. My name's Leighton, Dewitt, and I'm your host. And I'd like to invite you all to support the Mindful Escape movement by heading over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Mindful Escape, where you can support the Mindful Escape movement and help inspire people all over the world to live their best possible life. Today, we have Aaron on the show, who worked in the executive leadership world for over 15 years and has now transitioned into being a coach. It's a really great episode because we touch on different things around mindset, beliefs, and what you can start doing today to start living a better life, start improving, learning, and growing. Listen closely, we'll jump straight in. Aaron, thank you for coming on to Mindful Escape. Tell us a little about yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Leighton, thank you for having me. What this pod is all about is, really registers with me, speaks to me. I come from really the past 15 plus years of my life has been spent in senior level executive leadership positions on both ends of the spectrum. Early in my career, I started in a much more stiff corporate environment, suit and tie, publicly traded company. The last few years, more in an early stage startup. So I got to see both ends of the spectrum, but continue to notice year after year, I'm not sure that's how I wanted to spend the back half of my career. It's just, we've all heard the term being a slave to a corporate environment, so to speak, and had always had an entrepreneurial itch. So last year, I really took advantage of that, took action, and launched my own executive leadership performance coaching firm, where I get to work now with high performance individuals, be my own boss, launch my own firm, be in an environment and a culture that I can fully create. So it's been an exceptionally gratifying pivot to this entrepreneurial venture from kind of my corporate background.
Yeah. And it sounds like a great move, especially from what you were doing before. I'm interested to know, being in that career path for such a long time, you're obviously doing well. What was it that triggered you to make the move? Like, why not just stay there with the good salary, the security, and all of that?
Yeah. And for a long portion of that time, that was exactly the plan. I was comfortable. I was kind of enjoying the perks of the roles. I had the definition of the golden handcuffs, and so, but as I kind of got more comfortable in those positions, I felt myself kind of getting, really sucked into a status quo, where as I got more comfortable, as it became just my nature and way of operating, I also started to know that I had so much more. There was a next level of what I could contribute. And sure, I could keep elevating myself through a promotion here and a promotion there, but I just knew that there was something bigger that I wanted to contribute to and make an impact on. I knew I wasn't living at my full potential. I wasn't operating as the best version of myself. And I knew deep down that venturing out to do my own thing, launch my own firm, really do something that I can build myself from the ground up was going to be the ultimate test of finding out what can I truly contribute and build. And I knew if I never took that leap, it was going to be something that would sit in the back of my mind and I would regret 20, 25 years from now. And it got to the point where I wasn't getting any younger, and the inaction was really starting to eat away at me. And so that was, really making that leap to follow what I knew was a purpose, mission-driven opportunity to kind of build from the ground up. That was all mine. Was really, so really purpose, if I had to simplify it into one word, was kind of the catalyst behind the jump.
Yeah, that's so good. And I love that you refer to the potential regret of not doing it.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people, they fear doing it, or they're concerned about what challenges might arise. And then they sit there in that should I, shouldn't I mode for a very long period of time.
It's pervasive, right? I think when you hit the nail on the head, the fear of failure kills so many dreams, right? It almost is that artificial ceiling on what we're truly capable of. And it's kind of funny because as you achieve more success, as you gain more experience, the fear of failure only grows. So as you get more stuck into that environment, you have the golden handcuffs, things are comfortable. It's all an illusion because, where the growth is outside of that. It's kind of, I know your audience is very familiar with this, and that is you have to leave your comfort zone to achieve growth. There is no growth inside the comfort zone. And I came across a study and really a survey that really stuck out to me a couple of years ago. And that was this global survey of senior level leaders where they were just asked, what percentage of your full potential do you feel like you're expressing in your day-to-day role? And the aggregation of all the answers came out to somewhere between 30 and 40%. So when you really think about that, is the leaders that we all know running some of the largest companies on the planet are only showing up and really giving, on average, 30 to 40% of their true potential, of what they're fully capable of. And what sits underneath that, just like you said, is that fear of failure, that fear of venturing out, being okay with status quo, getting a little too comfortable. And I knew in the back of my mind that while that was true in this moment in time, I just knew that there was so much more that I was gonna regret, decades into the future of not making the jump when I knew I was able and capable to make that jump.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And the thing I'd like to touch on is as you stay longer and work your way up, it becomes harder to make that leap. I always used to say to myself, oh, I just need a bit more experience, or I need to do it for longer, or I need to learn more. But actually then you get promoted, or you get paid more, and it just gets harder and harder the longer you hold on for. So that's a really great point. One of the great things about your experience is that you worked in both a larger business and also as a startup. And some people don't get the opportunity to do both. As you moved into running your own business, what was the biggest challenge for you?
Yeah, it was really addressing head on exactly what we were just talking about. It was that fear of failure. It was getting on the other side of the uncertainty of all the things that, in a professional environment you take for granted. You're going to have that paycheck show up every 2 weeks. There's challenges to deal with, and there's problems, and there's political battles that you face, but the money is going to keep kind of showing up. And so when you venture out kind of on your own, from a financial standpoint, the most difficult thing for me to wrap my mind around was, okay, we're truly building this thing up from the ground. And that does include the financial aspect too. I'm not walking into a new salary. It wasn't part of the equation of I'm leaving salary X for salary and bonus and compensation structure Y. It's you're going from truly the ground up. And I think that has a whole different level of responsibility, accountability, and uncertainty that kind of comes along with that. Is like you have to make it work. You're not surrounded by a team anymore. You don't have a corporate umbrella that you can bank on. This all now falls on you. But on the other side of that type of pressure, in my opinion, is a privilege. That's what really pulls you out of that comfort zone and puts you on the very outer edges of your current capabilities. And you find out, by way of default, you have to tap into those reservoirs of potential and capability to build this. And so while there's some of that uncertainty to deal with, you quickly tap into a level of focus and performance that you just weren't able to, you weren't forced to in those more comfortable environments.
Yeah, that's a really good point around putting yourself under that pressure, because
Mhm.
I remember when I'd quit my job and I'd got used to, at the end of the month, a certain amount of money landing. And I
Mhm.
carried on living the lifestyle where I thought that money was going to come. And I got to the end of the month and I'm like, oh, hang on a second. It's
Yeah,
not the
things are a little
same.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, then the pressure does come on and you've got to, figure out how you're going to make it work. So that's a really great point.
Yeah, and there's something else you said too that I think is maybe a derivative of the fear of failure, but it's all about waiting for that perfect opportunity, right? So when you think about what prevents people from making that exit of kind of the corporate role, the corporate lifestyle, maybe chasing, a big dream or aspiration or entrepreneurial venture, what you said rang so true to me because I hear it all the time. It's like, well, I'm waiting for the right time. Now is not the right time, or I'm waiting till I get that next promotion. I'm waiting to get a certain number in my bank account. I'm just waiting for the right moment. Um, and kind of the big myth buster here that I hate to be the bearer of bad news for a lot of people, but there is no perfect moment. There's never going to be. I mean, you're always going to have reasons, excuses, or perceived risk on why not to make that leap. No one's ever going to knock at your door. You open it and they deliver on a silver platter. Here's your perfect opportunity. It doesn't exist. And so I think we all have to really start embracing the concept and the perspective around what is perceived as perfect and start really, better creating a better relationship around imperfect action and opportunities because it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be some degree of imperfection, but I think that's the beauty of it. So the more that we can embrace that and get excited about the learning that comes on the other side of taking imperfect action, I just think there's so much magic there.
Yeah, it's such a great point. And it comes up a lot actually on this podcast about perfection is stopping you from taking action. And
Mhm.
yeah, sometimes you just got to get over or get out of your own way, essentially.
Yeah, because I mean, think about the downside, right? And there are plenty of examples out there of people who have lived their entire lives waiting on that perfect moment to show up. It never did because it doesn't exist. And they're in their 60s, 70s, and 80s thinking about all the what ifs, thinking about I should have took action when I didn't. All of that sits heavy in kind of those later years because it shows up in the form of regret. They're thinking about what could have been had I taken imperfect action or accepted some level of risk. And that's why I kind of used the term earlier that these comfort zones, these status quos that we're in, they provide the illusion of safety. But as we kind of gain more experience and kind of go through life, we quickly start discovering that it's just an illusion. It's not really protecting us from anything. As a matter of fact, it's holding us back from truly being able to find out what the best version of ourselves looks, feels, and acts like. And so, yeah, you can wait around your entire life for that perfect opportunity, but the perfect opportunity is never going to show up.
Yeah. And I think the message for anyone listening is that you just need to get into that uncomfortable zone, take action.
Yeah. I hate to make it sound so cliche here, but yeah, there's something beautiful about embracing and understanding um, you know a level of comfort with being uncomfortable, because that's always where you're going to do your best work. And I'm not promoting any type of operating model of always being stressed out, always being anxious. I think there's with anything, moderation is important and balance is important. But if you have no stress or you have you're not being challenged, you're not being stressed, and you're basically able to operate your life and your day on cruise control. That's just as worse as, or just as bad as, too much stress. I think that there's a Goldilocks type of middle ground there, where a little bit of challenge, a little bit of stress, and a little bit of adventure and kind of what you're doing, building and making that leap forward is always going to be that sweet spot of where you're going to do your best work, where you feel the most fulfilled, where you're operating with a sense of fulfillment and purpose. I think it's in that sweet spot is where the magic happens.
Yeah, for sure. From your perspective, you obviously work with a lot of people through your coaching and they're going through different challenges. But from a personal perspective, what would you say the biggest lesson was for you throughout your journey?
Yeah. It's that's a big question. And for me, it's kind of unique. I think what separates me in the work that I do is very experience backed. And what I mean by that is I've essentially created a proprietary methodology that is exactly what I wish I would have had in my corporate background, where I was making all my mistakes. And so I think that the biggest takeaway there is to always be a great student. Learn just as much from things that are going well as you are with things that aren't. There's going to be learnings on either side of them. So if you can be a learning machine, it's a guaranteed way to always create a sustainable competitive advantage for yourself. And so as I look back at all of my mistakes, and I was a young leader starting at 23 years old, put in charge of managing a very large business, to a member of the executive leadership team before the age of 30. And while that sounds nice on the surface, what sits underneath that is I'm confident I've made every mistake there was to make. And when I trace back, what were the drivers of the missteps? What were the drivers and causes of the failures? The big lesson that I wish I would have had was being much more open-minded and focused on continuous improvement, not allowing success and experience to get in the way of the 5 big things that make up my mythology, is weakening my awareness of where I'm at from a current state standpoint. If you don't know what needs to be improved or enhanced, you can't improve anything that you're not aware of. Clarity, knowing where your blind spots are, knowing where your limiting beliefs are, knowing even how you're defining success for yourself. Vision around milestones and goals, not being clear on, based on that definition of success, what's the process to get there? And then thought partnership and accountability. Never think you're the smartest person in the room. There's always something to learn. And so it's just making sure that you're in a learning mode and not allowing one of those areas to show up as a weakness. Because with the people that I work with and my prior background, all of the big missteps tie back to one of those 5 key areas that, started developing a weakness. And it is the biggest blockers of preventing people from finding new levels of success. So it's all that wisdom and mythology that I wish I would have had then that I have now, that could have saved me a hell of a lot of time and heartache. I think it's being, just radically open-minded and just always look to learn.
Yeah, I think the biggest point that I've just taken from that, there was so many good points, but one that really resonated with me was, in my old career, you get to a certain level, and I think you can sometimes become overconfident, and you're very good at what you're doing, so you just focus on doing that well, and you don't take as many opportunities to learn as you could. And one of the things that I promised myself when I left London and started traveling is that for every person I meet, I will try and learn something.
Oh, that's great.
doesn't matter what it is, but everyone you meet on your journey has had a different life. And it doesn't matter if they're older or younger and the experiences they've had, there is probably at least one thing you can learn. And just taking that mindset, I've learned so much over the last year. It's been incredible. So yeah, I really like that.
That is such a great point. I actually did something similar in my corporate background too. It's just, when you are the highest ranking or highest paid person in the room, it's easy to show up and just kind of go through the motions, get the updates, and you're not really engaging at a level that further develops you as a person. I found myself doing that. I think I was probably doing that for years, as a matter of fact. And doing the same thing, I created my WDIL principle. And so every meeting, every phone call, every engagement that I had, I love to write down notes. So I write down everything. And so in my notebook on the right side column, I would write those initials, WDIL. That was a visual trigger for me to get myself in learning mode. And what that stood for is I needed to create bullet points of items that kind of asking myself the question, what did I learn? And so when I had that staring back at me on my piece of paper, even in meetings where I'd been in the same status update meeting for years, it forced me to ask questions I otherwise wouldn't have asked. It forced me to understand context behind numbers or metrics I was seeing. And I now apply that kind of widely across everything that I do. Just like you mentioned, every opportunity is a learning opportunity. So forcing myself to ask myself the question, what did I learn? Am I asking the right questions to learn new information? How am I creating feedback loops for myself? And it's such a great mindset trick to have and a tool to have to really encourage continuous learning.
Yeah, and I think that's the point and a reminder really that it is a continuous journey. It doesn't end, and we just have to keep compounding those lessons and keep building and growing, and yeah, a never-ending journey. If you were to speak to your younger self, let's jump back maybe 5, 6 years. Is
Mhm.
there a piece of advice that you would like to give yourself?
Yeah, it's I actually posted about this a few days ago, and it's just if I could go back in time, whether it's 5 years prior or go speak to my 20-year-old self, I would love to sit myself down and share the wisdom of continuous improvement. And there's such great magic in the effects of compound interest. And I think that applies to us from a personal development standpoint is, when you can think about continuous improvement and the concept of getting just 1% better each day, setting up the right systems to reflect on how can I get better tomorrow than I was today? How do I go to bed smarter tonight than when I woke up this morning? I think as my younger self, if I could have better understood this concept, better grasp the wisdom that comes with that, 1% better every day stacks into staggering results over time. And, time is our most finite resource. And it's also a trajectory leverage. So with bad habits, you can compound into a deteriorating performance very, very quickly. With good habits, good routines, and a continuous learning and improvement mindset, those 1% gains over a 12-month period can stack up to, I think the number is you can be 37 times better than where you were at the start of the year. And so going back to my younger self, if I could have really implanted that wisdom into my brain and really thinking about how time can serve as a great trajectory for me on the space of continuous improvement, would be the single biggest thing that I wish I would have known then that I know now.
Yeah, it's such a great piece of advice. And I just wonder, because often I think about what advice would I give myself at different ages. And I wonder if you were speaking to your 20-year-old self, would you listen?
Yeah, that's the other side of the coin, right? Is like, yeah, and there's probably some supplemental advice that kind of goes along with that. And that is to never think you have it all figured out. And it kind of leads back to some of my key points is around clarity, around thought partnership, around accountability that kind of make up my mythology is never get to a place where you're not coachable. Never get to a place where you're not open-minded. Never get to a place where when you're delivered incredible wisdom that you're just not even open enough to accept it and apply it. It kind of goes, I feel like we're creating a theme here. It kind of all ties back to just being that lifelong learner. And I think that's great supplemental advice is first and foremost, always be in a position to receive what's being given to you in the form of wisdom, experience, and knowledge. Because like for myself, it took me 15 years of just grinding away to get the wisdom that I have today around development, leadership development, increasing your full potential. And so, yeah, it's like the worst part about sharing that, it would be with someone, my 20-year-old self, who's not even in a mental position to be able to accept it just because they think they have the world all figured out already.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
On that point, I mean, I'd be interested to know how you have changed and how your perception of the world has changed as you've transitioned from employee to running your own business. Would you say that you've changed a lot, very similar, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of change. I think I think more than change, I think a better term for what I'm kind of going through and what I've been experiencing is more evolution. So it's not necessarily about this being different than it was prior, but it's all about leveraging that continuous improvement and that learning to be able to adjust, make the tweaks. It's almost like kind of a dashboard of a 747 airplane. You've got the dials, the knobs, the levers. And so as you gain kind of more experience, as you're putting yourself into more situations and opportunities that provide even greater learning experiences, you find yourself starting to evolve. You're broadening your perspective. You're stretching your thinking. And quite frankly, you're stress testing a lot of your old beliefs, a lot of the thesis that you had around how things work, how people operate, how the world is structured. It's just a great opportunity as you evolve to really stress test those beliefs. And I think the one thing that kind of comes to mind for me right now, when I think about my past on the employee side and all the success and the experience, I had a lot of very strong opinions that were tightly held. It was like, this is what I think, this is why I think it, and I'm firm on this. Now, with more wisdom, with more knowledge and more experience, I really shifted that equation. I have thoughtful opinions that I can back up with why it is and the context and background of why my thoughts are what they are, but they're now loosely held because I have a much deeper appreciation that I don't have it all figured out. And I prioritize getting things right much more than me being the one to always be right. And so I found myself much more able to adapt, pivot, and be flexible when I'm just presented with better facts, with more information, with a better idea, even if it wasn't mine. So I think that's been the big evolutionary transition of strong opinions tightly held from a big ego to now being just open to just being more effective. And that's thoughtful opinions loosely held. I'm able to adapt very quickly if I'm presented with a better idea.
Yeah, that's so great. What would you say? Because I'm thinking now, as you go through this transition, obviously you learn new things all the time and you evolve, which is such a great word. I was listening to a podcast and they said, I don't use the word better because it means that I was worse. I use the word evolve because I will continue to evolve, which is so beautiful. But a lot of the beliefs and the conditions that are within us are sometimes hard to unlearn. Have you got any tips or strategies that you would recommend to help us come away from that so that we can be more open-minded?
Yeah. I think it's, if I'll use this in a very hard-hitting example. Someone who I follow very closely is a man by the name of Ray Dalio, and he's formed one of the biggest hedge funds in the world. He wrote the book Principles. He's really helped shape my thinking around kind of key principles. And when it comes to being radically open-minded, he kind of has this quote that's always stuck with me, that if you can't look back 12 months ago, 24 months ago, and feel stupid about something that you thought or the way that you were acting, that's a sign that you're not growing. And so I kind of taken that as, it's okay to not feel like our identity is always so wrapped up in our achievements or our success. And I use that phrase as almost to give myself permission to kind of look back at the things that I thought a year ago or 2 years ago, and, be okay with feeling stupid as that kind of sounds, because that is a signal and a sign more than anything else that I was open-minded and able to learn, able to grow, able to be open-minded. And so if we could wrap that back up into a piece of guidance or advice, is be okay with feeling stupid. That's a good sign, because it's a reflection of how far your thoughts have evolved and came from where you maybe have just thought about things 12 months ago. And so always be open to challenging yourself, stress test those beliefs. And if on the other side of that, you feel a little bit stupid by the way that you thought about things before, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think along with be okay with feeling a little bit stupid or silly, it's also okay to feel like a beginner at something as you're trying new things, and feel a bit silly or stupid when you're making mistakes. And I think it all comes back round again to what we said at the beginning about perfection and not having to have things perfect, and just embrace that uncomfortableness.
Yeah, we sometimes get so caught up in our own ego and identities that it actually prevents us from getting better, becoming a better version of ourselves, is because we think any small misstep, mistake, or failure is such this big reflection, and everybody's looking at us, and all of our LinkedIn followers are going to judge us, and no one's watching our every move that closely. It is okay to make those mistakes, to feel a little silly, to feel stupid about things that you've done before. All of those experiences, I think about those in the grand scheme of things of life. Those are just reps. And the more reps that you get, the more experiences that you gain, those are all learning feedback loops. And I think if anything else, if the audience can take anything away from our conversation, is always prioritize your path towards becoming the best version of your unique self. Don't prioritize kind of the external eyeballs or the perception of how society is kind of viewing us, because that will always be a limiter, be a blocker to the full potential that we have. And so as long as you're clear on your journey, as long as you get fulfillment and purpose out of that, even the missteps and the mistakes and failures along the way are incredible nuggets of wisdom that you're giving yourself from putting yourself in those experiences and taking advantage of those opportunities. It's not about necessarily what other people think of us. It's about that continuous learning, that continuous improvement. And if we can commit to ourselves of just always putting ourselves in a position to grow and improve, there's no downside to that, no matter how it looks to the outside world or how we think it looks to the outside world.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think that's just a fantastic way to just wrap everything up.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you online?
So the easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm super active there. I'm posting some form of value, kind of what I like to call it, every single day almost. And then from there, you can find all my other pages, channels. The full website launch will be in a couple weeks. So yeah, I think LinkedIn's the best place to connect, share, engage with all of these great topics that lead towards continuous improvement.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.
And there we have it. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you found value, make sure you jump onto Instagram right now and share it on your story so someone else can find value in it too. The biggest takeaway for me was around always learning. And it sounds so simple and cliche, but very often we get stuck into a routine of hustle, 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 and we're so fixated on getting things done that we don't grow, learn, and develop. But in order to be the best version of ourselves, and as Aaron says, continue to evolve, we need to keep getting better. And even if it's just 1% every day, that is enough to get you to the next step. So keep learning, keep growing, and I'll see you same time next week. Thanks for listening.